Show you the skills. Sorry.
One thing we ask of you, one thing that we desire, that as we worship you, Lord, come and change our lives. Arise, 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 take your place, be enthroned on our praise. Arise, King of Kings, Holy God, as we sing. Arise, 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 arise. One thing we ask of you, one thing that we desire, that as we worship you, Lord, come and change our lives. Arise, 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 take your place, be enthroned on our praise. Arise, King of Kings, Holy God, as we sing. Arise, 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 arise.
Lord, change our lives. Jesus, arise. Lord, change our lives. Jesus, arise.
All right, guys, arise, take your place, be enthroned on our praise. Arise, King of Kings, Holy God, as we sing. Arise, take your place, be enthroned on our praise. Arise, King of Kings, Holy God, as we sing. Arise, 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 arise.
All right, you can go ahead and have a seat. John.
Well, I hope you got some idea of what this sign means. Science and faith are compatible. They support each other. They reinforce each other. And the best minds in the scientific community have always supported that concept. So we've talked about the fact that there was a beginning. And we've talked about the fact that the beginning was caused. The question is, what was the cause? Was the cause an intelligent God that created with purpose? Got to have that drink. What's in there? Or was it blind, mechanic, opportunistic chance? We looked at the statement that the college textbook would give, written by an atheist, and we've seen that our kids are faced with this idea. What I'd like to do in this session is, well, let me mention this just briefly, because I think this is kind of relevant. In reference to the question about Huxley's remark about us being a product of chance, commenting on that, look what this says. I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning, and consequently assumed it had none, and was able without difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. The philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is concerned to prove there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to. For myself, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation, sexual and political. You want to justify sleeping with everything that moves and a few things that don't? Get rid of God. Get rid of God. One of the lessons we don't have scheduled this weekend is what I call morality's proof of God. But as a former atheist, I used to argue that I was as moral as anything else. But the fact of the matter was I wasn't. And I had no real reason to be moral. You want to justify a political extermination system? Get rid of God. I'll show you some of that on Sunday morning because there's compelling evidence that what happened with Hitler, what has happened in a number of cases like that, is centered upon rejecting the concept of God. So the atheists have responded to that, and I think have responded honestly to it. So let's talk about 4 evidences of design for a few minutes. And I'm only going to take one example of maybe each of these. May run 2 of them together. We'll see how time goes. But one area that I'd like to talk about is what I call intuitive design. Now, intuitive means I'm not going to put any mathematical analysis on this thing. I just ask you to think, and ask yourself, okay, how did this happen? Let me give you an example. I was doing a lectureship in Florida years ago, and near Orlando, and I was invited to stay with a family that had a house out in the country. And as I pulled into their driveway, I noticed they had a pond in their front yard, and they had their teenage boys were out seining the pond. And I went in and noticed there were some pumps going, pumping the pond dry. So I said to the guy that owned the house, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're pumping the pond dry." He said, we got the rough fish out of it, and we want to dig it deeper. And I looked at the bottom of the pond, and the bottom of the pond was crawling with turtles. And there must have been a couple of hundred turtles in this little 2-acre pond. I said, "What are you going to do with all those turtles?" He said, "Well, I called the county ag agent, said not to worry about it. They'd take care of themselves." So I'm thinking, okay, they'll dig down in the mud. They'll be okay. That night after the lectures, I was going home about midnight, and we pulled in the guy's driveway, and there was a herd of turtles. What do you call a whole bunch of turtles going one direction? I call it a herd. A herd of turtles going across the guy's driveway. And that's the only direction they were going. I had to get out of the car and move the turtles off the road so the guy could get in his driveway. In the morning, we got up, walked down to the pond, and there was an interstate blasted through the yucca and the underbrush where all the turtles had gone. And we followed the path, and about a mile down the road, we came to another pond. And the last of the turtles were just getting to the new pond. We went back, looked at the topographic map. If they had gone any other direction than the way they went, it would have been 8 miles to the nearest body of water. They went straight as an arrow to the nearest body of water. Question: how did they know it was there? Answer: polarized light. Little physics lesson here. You're standing on the edge of a lake with a flat rock in your hand. If you throw the rock in the water, does it matter how you throw it as to what it will do? Well, yeah, I think all of you know that if you throw it parallel to the water, the thing will skip. I mean, surely none of you had such a deprived childhood you didn't skip rocks, right? Okay, and you know that at a higher angle it will penetrate. That's also true of light. Light is actually an infinitely flat little rock. It's called a photon. It has only 2 dimensions. So just like the rock, it will penetrate or it will skip depending upon the angle. If it is thrown parallel to the water, it will skip. But only the photons that are flat, that are vibrating parallel to the water, will skip. They are polarized. Any of them that are not flat will penetrate. So do you understand how your Polaroid sunglasses work? Your Polaroid sunglasses, which cut glare, have a piece of plastic where the molecules are arranged vertically, which means bounced light, which is polarized, cannot penetrate. Did you know that turtles wear Polaroids? Well, actually, the cornea of the turtle's eye is made of a material that is parallel to the surface of the water. So when the turtle is sitting looking at the horizon, the only thing he sees is the light that has reflected. So he just heads for the light, which will be coming from the nearest body of water. Isn't that cool? Sometimes that can get messed up, by the way. We have a target area near a pond, not too far from my house. A couple of years ago, when the turtles were laying their eggs, it was rainy, and the lights were on at Target. They ended up with almost 200 turtles in their parking lot. As a matter of fact, if you go to Florida, it's now against the law to have lights on the beach in Florida because it messes up the turtles that come in to nest. So it's an eloquently designed system. And try to construct a chance explanation. By the way, let me give you a thinking person's question. You know, that's what I love about teaching. Give my kids thinking person's questions. Canadian geese wear Polaroids. Except unlike the turtle, where the Polaroid is going this way, the goose Polaroid is this way. Why? Thinking person's question. And we'll have you answer it in the Q&A. Intuitive design. There are so many cases in nature where you look at it and say, how did this come about? What an incredible thing it is. Let me show you another one that's a little bit different. Mathematicians have known for a long time there's a thing called a Fibonacci's ratio. Fibonacci's ratio is really simple. You just take one number and add it to the next number to get the next number. So as you look at the screen there, 8 plus 13 is 21, 13 plus 21 is 34, 21 plus 34 is 55, and so forth. That's a Fibonacci sequence. Mathematicians go nuts when they see stuff like that. Well, they're kind of strange people, so they, gives them something to wonder about. But if you take architecture, in Architecture 101, you will learn that Fibonacci's ratio, called the magic ratio, is a fundamental tool in architecture. If you make a room with Fibonacci numbers, like 8 by 13, people will say, hey, man, I like that room. If you made it some other dimension, like 5 by 13, people will say, something wrong with this. Something wrong with this. I don't like this. So in architecture, you learn what is called a pleasing ratio, the Fibonacci ratio. Another interesting thing about the Fibonacci ratio is that if you connect the corners of squares cut off the Fibonacci ratio, you get what's called a Fibonacci spiral. So the Fibonacci spiral is used in designing architectural spirals, staircases, decorative things. And it's used because people like the Fibonacci spiral. It is aesthetically appealing. People like it. You know what's interesting? Apparently God likes it too, because he uses it an incredible number of times. When you look at the arms of a galaxy, the arms of the galaxy are wound with the Fibonacci spiral. If you took that spiral and superimposed it upon the arms of the galaxy, it fits perfectly. You watch a wave, a curl of a wave, and put the Fibonacci spiral on it, it will fit perfectly. You watch water go down the drain, counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere, clockwise in the southern. You know what the first thing I did was when I got to South America? Went in the restroom, filled the sink, pulled the plug. Sure enough, went down the wrong way. Actually, that's a very weak force. That won't work all the time. But the fact of the matter is, however it goes down the drain, it goes down in a Fibonacci spiral. You say, well, okay, that's a gravitational something or other. No. Because in weightlessness, subatomic particles curl with the Fibonacci spiral. When water counteracts gravity, you still get a Fibonacci spiral. You see it in seashells, living and extinct. You see it in your garden snail. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the curl of the teeth of a groundhog. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the teeth of a grizzly bear. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the beak of every bird you can think of. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the horns of every animal that has horns, both living and extinct. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the curl of the tail of a chameleon. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the petals of a magnolia. You see the Fibonacci spiral in the curl of the sunflower seed. You see it in the curl of a pine cone. You see it in the tubers of potatoes and tomatoes and pumpkins. You see it in the tubers and in a fingerprint. Are you getting a pattern here? Now, there is no reason for this. The Fibonacci spiral is not stronger than other geometric shapes. A hexagon is much stronger than any other geometric shape. That's why the wings on SSTs are made with hexagons. Open spacing uses triangles. There is no strength advantage. Now, give me an evolutionary explanation here. How are you more fit because your fingerprint curls with a Fibonacci spiral than you would if it didn't? What's natural selection going to work on? There is no reason for this spiral, but it is prevalent all through nature. Did you know there is an outfit called the American Fibonacci Society that does nothing but look for Fibonacci spirals in nature? They write books and monographs. They have over 50,000 manuscripts and monoliths written showing Fibonacci spirals in nature. These are people with way too much time on their hands. But anyway, the point is, it occurred all over nature. The proboscis of a moth is a Fibonacci spiral. The feather duster worms on the floor of the ocean, a Fibonacci spiral. A spider web curls with a Fibonacci spiral. The helical structure inside DNA, a Fibonacci spiral. The limbic structures in the human brain. I gave this lecture at MIT a couple of years ago. One of the doctors there came up to me. He said, "Did you know that there are 21 Fibonacci spirals in the human brain?" I said, "No, I didn't know that. Tell me more." He said, "I'll send you a manuscript on that." So I get this 425-page manuscript. And I don't begin to understand all of it, but I can see all the limbic structures in the human brain that use the Fibonacci spiral. The cochlea in the inner ear of the human is a Fibonacci spiral. The DNA helix is a Fibonacci spiral, the umbilical cord of a baby. Now, let me say this again. There is no strength advantage. There is no evolutionary advantage. And yet it is seen prevalent in nature. An intuitive example of God's appreciation of beauty. See, God has not just created the creation for the sense of survival. There are wonderful things in nature. Thousands of examples that could be given of Fibonacci beauty. Beauty that is not practical in any way. But let me give you another example. If you come to South Bend, Indiana, where I live on the border, and I take you on a tour of South Bend, there's stuff that you might be interested in. The Gold Dome at Notre Dame. Old Baldy at Lake Michigan. No, don't get ahead of me. It's not anything to do with me. Old Baldy is the largest sand dune on any fresh body of water in the world. A beautiful place. But one of the places I would take you is the corner of York and Ridgedale in South Bend. I'd take you by this house. The house is in my school district. The family who lives there has had 9 kids in my classes. I'm yearbook photographer for the school, so I've taken lots of pictures in that house. It's an amazing house. This is the north side, little tiny windows. On the other side, very small windows. And the glass is special. And it has this typical multiple roof line, which this particular architect uses in just about everything he does. And after you oohed and awed for a while, I would tell you, well, this is a very famous architect. His name is Frank Lloyd Wright. You know, because I was in that house a lot and knew the family, I started looking for Frank Lloyd Wright architecture as I traveled. I was in Tucson one time, went by this place. I'm in a limo going to the airport, and I yelled at the limo driver, stop, I got to get a picture. I shot the picture, got back in. I'm going nuts. I said, man, look at this. Multiple roof line, big windows on this side, little windows there. This looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright house. He said, how'd you know that? I said, I recognize the design. 3 weeks later, I was at Berkeley in California, at the University of California. Went by this place. I'm in the taxi cab this time. I yelled at the cab driver, stop. I got to get out. I got to take a picture. I got the picture, got back in. I said, man, look at this. Big windows here, little windows on the other side, multiple roof line. This looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright house. He said, how'd you know that? I said, I recognize the design. And then I was in Lakeland, Florida, Southern Florida University. And I'm walking on the campus with the dean of students, and I'm saying, man, you guys, you have no shame at all. Here you took one of our northern architects and copied everything he did to make a university. He said, well, didn't you see the sign? I said, what sign? He pointed, there's a big sign that says this entire university was designed by the famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. So I'm extracting my foot from my mouth again. And then, oh my. If you ever get up around Pittsburgh, don't miss Falling Waters. Probably Frank Lloyd Wright's greatest architectural achievement. This house is heated by the spring in the winter, cool by the spring and the summer. Every room has unique designs. See, I'm a human being. One part of being human is that I have the capacity to appreciate beauty. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about what is God and who created God. What is a human being? How do I know I have a soul? What proves that I have a soul? What is it about me that is unique to me? And one part of that is the aesthetic ability to have things that have beauty. Maybe not purpose, but beauty. There are wonderful things in the creation which do not aid survival. I mean, these colors in these birds don't enhance the survival capability of the birds. But look at the beauty that's involved in them. Give a chance explanation for beauty. There have been articles in Scientific American about this because it doesn't fit any evolutionary paradigm. Wonderful illustrations of design done just because it is aesthetically appealing. So the Fibonacci ratio, what it shows is like these gorgeous colored birds. God has an appreciation for beauty. God loves art. He loves music. So when we sing praises to God, he's also interested in the things that we show him, the design that is involved in what we do. Intuitive design. The other kind of design that is involved, and by the way, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of examples. On our websites, we have one called dandydesigns.org that goes through example after example after example like this. Over on the table, we have books that deal with these. There's 5 volumes called Dandy Designs. Over 100 examples in each book. So we're talking 500 or 600 things like the 2 I've just shown you. The creation is full of examples of beauty and wisdom and design. Well, let's put some numbers on this. Because I'd like to talk about the mathematical proof of design. Years ago, there was a book written by a gentleman, a scientist, a biologist. His name was Behe, called Darwin's Black Box. What Behe was doing was saying, okay, let's put some mathematics on our assumptions. Let's talk about what the probabilities are. Let's challenge our thinking here and ask, is it statistically reasonable to believe the theories that we're presenting? Now, Behe did this biologically. I have a long discussion about his material in some of our books. I like to do the physics part of it with all the constants, but let's do it simple tonight, both for time and because it's getting late. Instead of going through all of that, I want to ask you to think through a simple question. What are the mathematical probabilities? Now listen carefully here, engineers, physics majors, high school kids. What are the mathematical probabilities that any kind, not ours necessarily, any kind of life could come into existence by chance alone from the Big Bang? Now be careful, college students. I'm not saying we're here. What are the odds we got here? No. You can't do that. That's logically incorrect. So this isn't that type of argument. We're going back before the Big Bang. We're going to have this humongous explosion. We don't worry about what blew up or who blew it up. We're asking, what are the odds that any kind of life could come into existence on a statistically on a life-supporting planet? Now, it can be Mr. Spock, it can be E.T., okay, but life. Now, I'm going to throw some stuff by you right here. You don't have to understand the astronomy. I'm going to throw by you, I promise you, you will understand the conclusion. But let's just show you the kind of variables we are talking about here. We live in a galaxy. I've talked about that. What I have not said to you is not all galaxies are the same. Our galaxy looks like this. But the most common kind of galaxy in space are elliptical galaxies. The problem with elliptical galaxies is they have no interstellar material. There is nothing to make a planet out of. There is nothing to make life out of. So how could you have life in a place where there's nothing to make it out of and nothing to put it on if you had it made? And that's 80% of all galaxies in space. They look like this. And by the way, astronomy buffs, I'm including dwarf ellipticals in this discussion. Some galaxies just blow up every so often. They're called irregular galaxies. Massive explosions could not be, again, a stable solar system in such a system. So these different kinds of galaxies have been studied. What we have discovered is that 4 out of every 100 galaxies could possibly contain a life-supporting planet. 1 out of every 25. Okay, that's interesting. File it away. We'll be right back. You may have noticed that galaxies don't look the same. When I've shown you pictures of galaxies, they don't look the same. There's 2 reasons for that. One reason is they're not the same. Some of them are round, some of them are flat. The other is how you look at them makes a difference. So for instance, that picture is looking down on the top. So if I take this deck of cards and you look at the top, you see the ace of hearts. If I rotate it 90 degrees and you look at this edge, it looks different. So if I rotated that galaxy 90 degrees, it would look like that. What has happened is that we have discovered where you are in the galaxy makes a difference. The green areas are places where the gravitational tidal forces are so great, no stable planet could exist in that system. The red areas are places where it's too active, black holes, other devices. Only within the dotted lines called axial gravity lines could you possibly have a stable solar system. These are called galactic habitable zones, GHZs. Go on the web, look up GHZ, you'll get a complete explanation. What are the odds of being in a GHZ? Well, that's easy. You just take the volume of the 2 donuts, one above and one below, which is about 12 cubic light years, and divide it by the volume of the whole galaxy, which is 15,750,000 cubic light years. So the odds are 12 out of 15,750,000. A very simple calculation. Okay, file it away. We'll be right back. The sun. The sun's an incredible furnace made of its own fuel. We talked about that. But not all stars are the same. When you leave here tonight, if you look at the horizon, you'll see blue stars rising in the horizon, the Pleiades. These are microwave emitters. They would cook anything that got anywhere near them. No life in a place like that. They are beautiful. You'll also see, as you look up at Orion, which is up above, that the stars are red. As a matter of fact, interesting discussion. The Hubble telescope has found that 70% of all stars in the sky are red dwarfs. 10% are white dwarfs. 15% are K dwarfs, which means 95% of all stars in the sky are too small to support a functional planetary system. In the discussion of exoplanets, they rarely mention that not all stars are of the right wavelength, temperature, or have the right disposition to support planets. My astronomy book says the odds of having the right kind of star can be as low as 1 in 25 million. And by the way, some stars are too big, like Betelgeuse and Orion. As a matter of fact, here's an interesting picture. This shows you Betelgeuse and Antares, 2 of the biggest stars. I'm looking at, the dot that is our sun is so small that your projection system isn't sensitive enough to show it. If you came up here and put a pinhole in the screen, it would still be bigger than what the sun is to the scale of these stars. Some stars are too big. If the sun became a red giant, it would look like the background, the Earth would look like the foreground, there'd be no life here. So this size system goes on and on. Many stars flare. Our sun doesn't do that. But the explosions taking place in other parts of space We've watched. We've seen it happen. And we know there would not be life-bearing planets in those areas. Many stars are not single stars. 95% of them have two or more stars orbiting each other. You don't need a PhD in astronomy to tell me what's happening if you're orbiting either one of those stars. That red stuff is not cotton candy. Our kids do a lab in high school. It's called the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, in which they plot the temperature of stars against the luminosity. There are 20 million different possible computer points on that diagram, and only 5 of them could possibly support a planetary system that could handle life. And some stars just blow your mind. And I'm not talking the blue star here, I'm talking the center of the blue disk. That's a star that is sucking the life out of that big blue giant star. This is actually a drawing. I will show you the photograph in just a minute. That object in the center will take that blue star and it will crush it to a mass the size of a thumbtack. If I were to shine a laser beam by here, it would catch the laser beam, spiral around the blue thing, and land in the center and disappear. And as you know, it's called a black hole. Black holes are seen all over the universe. If a black hole came near the sun, it would rip it apart instantly. If a black hole came near a terrestrial body like the Earth, it would destroy it in a literal flash. Now, you've seen imaginative movies about black holes. They're not even good science fiction. But the fact of the matter is, these are real objects. They distort the region of space around them. And here's our first photograph of a black hole. As you can see, it's digital. The white is in the center, is a star being destroyed as it is sucked into the black hole, which is immediately to its left and down. We have discovered over 350 black holes in the last 6 months. Every one of them demonstrating that most parts of space are too unstable to support a functional planetary system. What are the odds of being a part of space with no black holes? Well, you can come up with about anything you want. Even the position we have is critical. What's wrong with Venus? Venus is too close to the sun. That destroys its capacity to have life. Otherwise, it would be pretty suitable. Incidentally, we have found the size is critical. If a planet is too small, it has no atmosphere, like Mercury. If a planet is too big, it has the wrong gases. And do you remember, and most of you aren't old enough to remember this, I'm beginning to realize, 1996, we had a really strange event happen. I was with Robert that year here. You know what happened in 1996? We saw an object coming into the solar system that was going to hit the Earth. Oh, it was a big scare. Now we have movies about asteroids hitting the Earth. But this thing was on target to hit the Earth. By the way, the one I'm talking about is the Levy-Shoemaker comet. This is Hale-Bopp, so it's not the same one. There is not a good picture of Levy-Shoemaker for a reason. Because as this comet was coming towards the Earth and doomsday prophecies were going nuts, Hal Lindsey had a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, in which he predicted the destruction and Armageddon and all that stuff. But as the object came near us, it had a problem. And as it went by Jupiter, the problem became monumental because Jupiter grabbed the object and ripped it up into 16 pieces. And in July of 1996, many of us sat in our living rooms and watched those pieces slam into the surface of Jupiter, creating a fireball bigger than the diameter of the Earth. Do you remember the picture I showed you in the last session about the red spot? That thing is 5 times the size of the red spot. Do you know what we've learned since that time? It is impossible for a comet of any size to hit the Earth. Because we have 5 comet sweepers, at least 5. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and probably Pluto and maybe the next one out, who are all arranged so their gravitational fields sweep anything coming from the Oort cloud into the Earth. It is a statistical impossibility for a comet to hit the Earth. If any of those planets were a different size or in a different position, we would have bombardment by comets. What are the odds of having comet sweepers strategically placed to protect us. You know, the more we learn about the creation, the more we see how God has made the earth a very, very special place. By the way, for you astronomy buffs, the reason the planets are aligned is because the ecliptic is pulling the comets in because the gravity piles up. And if you are aware of the asteroid wiping out the dinosaurs, the asteroids are between Jupiter and Mars. That's a different animal with a different purpose and actually has a benefit. So the comet thing is real. And we could go on and on. The magnetic field of the Earth is critical to the survival of life upon the Earth, protecting us from charged particles coming from the sun. The Earth's tilt is controlled by the moon. Do you realize if we didn't have a moon, the Earth would not stay at 22.5 degrees? And if that happened, the Earth would become inhospitable for life within 10 years. Want to read a book on it? Read What If the Moon Didn't Exist by the head of the astronomy department at the University of Maine, Neil Cummins. Wonderful presentation showing the critical nature of the moon. The moon keeps our Earth hospitable for life. You thought the moon was just for lovers. Well, it's good for that, but that's not the only purpose. It has a very practical purpose. Now, what I would like to do here, and the layers of the atmosphere. Do you know our atmosphere has 26 layers? The one you've heard about is the ozone layer, the third one up from the bottom. That's the one your deodorant's tearing up, but they're all critical. Now, let's put it together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to list 10 of these variables on the screen. And you can see the variables. And I'm going to assign a probability to the variables that is less than what I gave you as we went through them. So the odds of having the right place in the galaxy, I said it was 12 out of 15,750,000. I'm going to use 1 in 100. I'm going to cut it way back. Don't exaggerate. The odds of having the right kind of star, I said 1 in 20 million. I'm going to use 1 in 25. The odds of right distance, I'm using Bode's law. So you look at those numbers and you say, yeah, I take those kind of chances every time I get on Interstate 70. Yeah, I hear you. But let me do a little lesson in probability here. I got a professional gambler sitting here in the front row. I'm going to ask this professional gambler to take a card, any card. You saw the ace of hearts. What are the odds that he'll draw the ace of hearts out of the deck? 1 in 52. We have some other professional gamblers in the audience. Okay. Take a card, any card. Just pick one out of there. All right, he took a card. What'd you get? Oh, he took 2 cards. Well, he got 2 kings, but I wanted the ace of hearts. All right, we'll put it back in. This time, I want him to draw the ace of spades twice in a row out of a cold deck. I hold out the ace and he draws a card. Try it again, see what you get. All right, he drew a card. He got the ace of spades. He's no amateur, but it was the ace of hearts. All right, let's try him again. I put it back in. Let's try him again. What are the odds this time? 1 in 52, good. You didn't say 1 in 51. I don't have to throw another tantrum. Okay. The 3 of clubs? You know, you better go into preaching or something. You're not going to make it as a gambler. On the other hand, that might be the greatest gamble of all. Anyway, the point is the odds are 1 in 52 each time. If you have 2 things that have to be right, you multiply the individual probabilities. So the chances of him drawing the ace of spades twice in a row out of a cold deck were 1 out of 52 times 1 out of 52. That's 1 chance out of 2,700. I'm sorry, 1 chance out of 2,504. All right, let's make it really hard. This time, I'm going to say, this guy's so good. He's so cool. He's going to draw the ace of spades, or the ace of hearts, 4 times in a row out of the cold deck. Hold out the deck, he pulls the ace of hearts. I put it back in, shuffle it up, he draws it again. I take it in, draw it again, I put it in, draw it again. 4 times in a row, he pulls the ace of hearts out of a shuffled deck. At that time, we start looking in his sleeve, up under his shoe. What are the odds? 1 out of 52 times 1 out of 52 times 1 out of 52 times 1 out of 52. That's 1 chance out of 7,311,616. If you don't believe it, multiply that. Now you say, what's this got to do with anything? Okay, back up there. It doesn't do any good to be in the right kind of galaxy if you're in the wrong place in the galaxy. It doesn't do good to be in the right kind of galaxy, the right place in the galaxy if you're going around the wrong kind of star. It doesn't do any good to be in the right kind, the right place, the right kind of star. You're sitting right on top of that star. You're going to burn, baby, burn! And if you're too far away, you're going to freeze. In other words, just like the deck of cards, everything up there has to be right. So what do you do with those numbers? What's the answer? You multiply 1 in 25 times, 1 in 100 times, 1 in 25 times, 1 in 50 times, 1 in 10. And if you do that, all of those, what you get up there, one chance out of 1, 7, 5, 7, 8, 1, 2, 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And the atheist has to say, if there's any chance at all, I'll take it. Okay. I mean, if that's your religion, okay. But does it make sense? Let me give you a little probability. If you jump out of an airplane 10,000 feet in the air with no parachute of any kind, the odds of your survival are 1 in 10 million, according to the American Parachute Club. 1 in 10 million. Well, let's suppose I got a billfold here with $1 million in it. Yeah. Well, anyway. Got a billfold here with $1 million in it. I'll give it to you tax-free. If you jump out of an airplane 10,000 feet above this city with nothing on but your birthday suit, who'll be first? You know, I gave this lecture at the University of California a few years ago, and I was really afraid to use this illustration. But even at Berkeley, nobody raised their hand. Nobody with a brain in their head will gamble their life on odds of 1 in 10 million. But do you realize that number is 176 million times less likely than what you already said you wouldn't take on your life? By not having your hand up a moment ago, you just demonstrated you know there's a God. That it is mathematically impossible to believe that we are the product of chance. And may I remind you, I only chose 10 variables. I could give you 100 more. On that table over there, there's a sheet that has, I think it's got 42 more, in addition to the one I've got up here. But if you got them all in there, what do you got? You got the right kind of rock in the right place. Now let's talk about life on the ball of rock, starting with the miliary experiment. You know, there's a guy in England called Anthony Flew. When I gave my lectures in England, he came to them. I was impressed. The man is famous. He's a philosopher. He was the #1 atheist of the 20th century, the Richard Dawkins of the 20th century. His objections were philosophical. He and I carried on communication for years and years and years. About 2 years before his death, he looked at the odds of life occurring by chance, and he said, you have to go where the evidence leads. And Anthony Flew, the atheist, his last book was titled, There Is a God. Because just Anthony Flew was honest with the evidence. And he knew that the statistical evidence could not be denied. And I'm asking you to be honest with the evidence. May I point out a couple of things? Ladies and gentlemen, this has not been a Bible spouting exposition here tonight. I have not quoted a single passage of Scripture since we came off the break. Not one. And I have not been quoting religious nuts. I've been quoting the best scientists of our day. People like Frederick Hoyle. People like Albert Einstein. People who are respected in the scientific community, but who are honest in their writings. And I'd also like to point out to you that the Bible does say what I've been saying. So let's quote a passage of Scripture. This is Romans 1, beginning with verse 18. For that which can be known of God lies plain before our eyes. God himself has made it clear to us. For those things of God which the eye is unable to see, ever since the world was made, have been clearly perceptible and understandable through the things he has made. That is all we have talked about tonight. Through the things he has made. We haven't talked about what God is. I've never known an atheist who knew what God is. Not who God is, what God is. That's tomorrow night. We haven't talked about which God. Why Jesus Christ? Why not Muhammad? Why not Buddha? Why not Zoroaster? Why not Baha'u'llah? That's tomorrow night. But he goes on and says, through the things he has made, even his eternal power and deity. The unbeliever then is without excuse. We can know there is a God. The evidence is so strong. But here comes our culture. They have refused to honor him as God or to give thanks to him. Hence, their thinking has ended in futility, and their misguided minds are plunged in darkness behind a facade of wisdom. They have become just fools. How many people do you know hiding behind a facade of wisdom? And how many of those folks do you know that are having a terrible time just dealing with life? I was raised by atheists. My mother and father were atheists. My brothers were atheists. I saw what it did to them. I saw the effects of the facade of wisdom. My father was a college professor, very bright man. And it wasn't until he was dying of leukemia that he decided there had to be a God. My brother was a devout atheist until he contracted Parkinson's. It was only then he was willing to listen to me and willing to look at the evidence, and ultimately became a Christian. My other brother had to hit bottom as an alcoholic. They had to stop his heart and restart it because of what alcohol did to him. And what led him to alcohol was his lack of belief in God. That's his words, not mine. I'm saying to you, you can intelligently and logically believe in God. And as we continue through this weekend, I hope we can answer some of those hard questions about who created God, where did God come from, why do we suffer? I don't have all the answers, but I've been around long enough to have a few answers. I hope you come back tomorrow night at 6 o'clock and allow us to share that. Robert, do you have an announcement to make?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll have a question and answer. It's John wanted to give everybody that needed to leave or didn't want to stay for the question and answer an opportunity to leave. So we're going to take just a short, like a 10-minute break. We'll start back up at a 1:45. If you have questions, you can write them and put them in the basket, and that way we've been live streaming this, and it's also being videoed. So that way we can read the questions and we can provide the answers to where at least when we read the questions, the people that are watching will know what's being asked rather than just you saying it from your seat. So let's take about a 10-minute break, and if you'd like to, you can come back for the question.